Morning, folks. I just wanted to take a few minutes to address the community and really talk about this period of transition and the apparent division that's really kind of going on in the community. And it's really a time that's quite uncertain, which is kind of ironic because we have the full rules and all the war scrolls now, and it's still really difficult to really make sense of what's going on because a lot of the essential elements are just completely lacking. So the age of Sigmar is now officially upon us, and some people do have a great deal of enthusiasm. I think that's great. I think that there will be new players, which is good, but it's clearly not 9th edition Warhammer Fantasy that we were expecting. In fact, the word fantasy should probably just in some ways be dropped because it's not even in the title. It's Warhammer Age of Sigmar. It's a completely new game. That's not necessarily bad. I mean, they had to change in some ways. I do believe that. Perhaps not as drastic a change as has happened. But I just want to take a few minutes to first discuss the people that want to continue playing 8th, and then discuss kind of Age of Sigmar as it is currently today. So those that want to still enjoy the old world, I think that's fantastic. If you think 8th was a great addition, then you really haven't lost anything. For me, there were plenty of models and armies that you probably don't have yet. There's still a lot of room to grow. I mean, those models, might not be necessarily available on Games Workshop forever, but they'll be available on eBay, and you can still get them, and you'll still have the army books and still have the complete system. How long that type of independent gameplay continues, I think, really depends on the individual gaming group you have. If you have a core dedicated gaming group, maybe people that you've been playing with for years on end, you can continue playing 8th independently very well. I don't think there's a problem there. For a lot of players, though, that maybe play at the local GW store or maybe have only been in it a couple of years, they just don't have the support and infrastructure, essentially, to continue playing 8th forever. I don't think that's that feasible for many people. I will say that GW does have a habit of reintroducing rules from previous editions. And so maybe some elements of the game will return in future versions of Age of Sigmar. And, if the game system is any indication, there's probably a new edition coming out in October, right? We'll see. I mean, certainly the release cycle's definitely been speeding up in recent years. So all jokes aside, if you're in for the long haul, it's possible that you can easily continue playing and really enjoy that, and that those elements of fantasy could very well be introduced. But for many of us, 8th was certainly not the most perfectly balanced system. There's a lot of things that were not that balanced about 8th. But GW always really encourages house rules. They if you read the White Dwarf articles, they're all about that. They're really clear that they want people to make the game their own. So there's no reason now, if you want to continue 8th, to easily fix all the things that were wrong with it. And go ahead and do that. That'd be awesome. And I think that that's a fantastic thing to do. But I wouldn't just dump all your models on eBay. Now's not the time to kind of do that. I'm sure eBay is absolutely flooded with cheap models, and that would be a horrible way to kind of do it now. I mean, wait a little time to kind of do it. Who knows? The models do generally retain their value in some form for years. I still buy models from the previous editions because I just think they're kind of cool, and I just enjoy having that large kind of army selection. So, on a related note, kind of the old world now truly does have a historical atmosphere. and I think that will continue to grow over the years. I'm far more of a collector than a gamer, and I'm always looking kind of long term. Years down the road, the old world's going to look very historical to us. And that's something I kind of like about the transition. And I certainly won't be getting rid of my fluff books and codexes and models and things like that anytime soon. So in 40K, they have the Horus Heresy, and that's a different historical period for those that don't play 40K. And it's now kind of independently supported by other aspects of Games Workshop. And I think that, who knows, maybe the old world, if it's still popular, might still kind of be reemerge in that type of capacity. But even if you don't want to participate in Age of Sigmar at all, I mean, some of the models you might like. Certainly, it's looking like there's going to be a lot of terrain kits, and you can certainly incorporate that into your 8th edition games, and that would be great. So now I just want to take some time to address the people that want to play Age of Sigmar or are going forward. And I'm sure by now you've all read the rules and the war scrolls and the old armies, and despite the apparent clarity, we all have the rules. There's still a huge amount of panic, really a lot of uncertainty, which is pretty bizarre. That GW would kind of have this type of system. We're really not really sure what to make of it. The game will naturally be attracted to those that play the other system, those that like skirmish, that are coming over, that want to start playing the new game. I think that's fantastic. I'll point out that more interchangeability between Age of Sigmar and the other GW game systems is a really positive move. There's going to be lots of bits, a lot of transition. I think that's great. A lot of traditional fantasy players don't like the skirmish feel, and I think that's a valid opinion. I mean, they think that it has a very chaotic component to it, and it's not as rigid and perhaps orderly as the traditional 8th fantasy that we all knew. But sometimes I really think there's kind of like an inherent. It's almost like a form of tribalism that really kind of comes into the hobby, where you get people that only play one game or only play the other, and they really look at the others as being not as good or kind of disdain. It really goes both ways. If you play a lot of fantasy, you look at the skirmish component and think, oh, it's just random garbage. I've actually known a lot of 40K players that look at rank system and think that that's just stupid. So it's this weird quasi mix that comes over from both sides, and I think the people like myself that have played both games and like both games are kind of a minority in many ways. But I wouldn't kind of. If that's your opinion, that's perfectly fine. I mean, people like ordered things. People like more things that are able to kind of move a bit more fluid. I think that is a play style. But I think you need to be a little bit less critical of the other game systems, essentially. So a lot of fantasy players, I've looked at the army scrolls and the basic rules, and there is a degree of complexity there that could be very good, and it might seem very chaotic. 40K to a fantasy player probably does just seem to be just random rules going off and just complete dice rolling constantly. But if you get into 40K and you play 40K very competitively, and there are competitive 40K players, it can be very competitive. It's a different play style, and that's all I can really say on that regard. It's all about making sure that when you do shoot, you shoot at the right things at the right time. And it's not just randomly moving your guys, all over the board. You have a strategy. So some units you want to commit early, others you don't. And I think that will play out in Age of Sigmar as well, the more people who play it. But I would kind of caution on that front that if you're a fantasy player, don't just go into Age of Sigmar with the same expectations. Clearly, it's a different game, but like the types of strategies that you once used are probably not valid, right? So if you go in and you just charged all out, if you line up each unit next to each other and just fly into the enemy, that's probably not a great way. We'll find out. But I know, like in 40K, you want units up front and units behind. That's not something you generally did. You don't usually put ranked units like they're usually in a line for the most part in 8th, right? You don't put units behind others. It just messes that up. That's no longer as big a deal. And so you want units that move fast. You want to commit. You want to kind of move around. You want to charge in at the right time. You want to allocate your attacks to the right enemies at the appropriate time. And I think that there's a lot of diversity in that. But they need to really examine how they're going to play the new game. I think that that's something that people will just need to learn to do. Every new edition has that element. Even 8th, when it first came out, 8th was a completely different new combat system to the previous one. It took a long time for people to really master it. And I think that that's the same thing here. It's just perhaps more of a change because it's such a different dynamic system. The fact that every unit was revamped is intimidating to those that have many armies. All right, I mean, I have hundreds of units, right? So I'll have just oodles of war scrolls all over the place. It'd be ridiculous to, how are you going to actually organize and know them all? But for a new player, you're just going to have a 4-page rulebook and then just a couple pages. And I think that's great. I think that could be a really positive thing for new players getting into the game. And, previous rulebooks had a basic rule section and an advanced rule section. I think few, if any, kind of really continue just playing the basic rules. I mean, I think we all graduated to the advanced rules day one for most of us when you first get into a new edition because we know what the other one is. For this, maybe GW is going a different route. They're publishing 4 pages of basic rules, and who knows? I mean, we simply just don't know. Even if all the rumors say no, who knows what GW is going to put out, next week? They're so mysterious about it. So maybe there is some sort of advanced rules we just don't know. When it comes to understanding, GW, yeesh. I mean, they're pretty bad at communicating, but yeah. So the rules, I mean, in some ways are almost too basic. I mean, I've read them now several times, and it's like so basic that you'd almost want like clarification from Games Workshop to existing fantasy players that absolutely states, yes, this is all there is, or yes, you can actually take all the models you want. Like they almost should just slam it down for everyone that's like, what is going on? We don't know what's probably in missions or scenarios. Maybe there is some structure in there that limits, I don't know, the amount of war scrolls you can take or the amount of turns in the game. I mean, things like that would really be helpful. But if you've read, I've read through the rules, and there are some positive elements. I think the biggest hurdle is the absolute lack of army composition and point system, and that could be exploited so badly. I mean, it doesn't take long to really think of how many exploitations you could have. And when you do a fantasy in 40K, they're very interrelated now. And 40K has a lot of use of unbound armies where composition is disregarded. But at least in that game, there's still associated penalties for making that selection. And there is still a system that restricts model count in some capacity. Unlike Age of Sigmar. And I don't, like most of you, I'm completely oblivious about how to make this really work. And some of us are already thinking about ways in which to impose a competitive structure on it by limiting characters and maybe the unit sizes and things like that. As it is, it's more like Apocalypse in 40K, where you can just take your entire collection. And Apocalypse, I've never really played it in 40K, but it seems to be far more of a casual game, right? Where you might play that on the weekend with your friends, and GW basically says it's a game where you can put your entire collection in, and that's perfectly fine. And but the current game really just seems more based upon potential arms races, right? Even if you're a new player, you buy the box the armies right out of the box, and whoever just invests and a few more dollars, well, not a few, but more money into the game will eventually just win. And maybe that's what Games Workshop is trying to do as a business decision. I don't know. I have a really hard time buying that as being, their line of thinking. It could be that. But for those of us that have been playing fantasy, we all know 8th was a truly massed combat. I mean, I have hundreds of models that I could easily field in any game. So if I wanted to crush my opponent under the current rule system, I don't see how the hell you could ever possibly win. So there just seems some basic conclusions and possibilities that are possible. And, perhaps the game is designed to be as basic as it is, and that is all there ever will be. Perhaps there are new rules forthcoming we just don't know of that will really tighten the system. Maybe some campaign or expansion in maybe just a few weeks. We just don't know. Maybe there's some sort of mechanic, that we've all just overlooked. I don't think that's possible, but maybe the game isn't completely out of whack as it seems on paper. Or perhaps GW, as they've always said, is just encouraging people to make their own house rules, and we just kind of go with it from there. But I think there is, again, GW likes friendly games, right? They're more of a casual gaming company. I mean, there are some competitive elements, but those are all independent at this point, with tournaments and things like that. So, as a casual company, they always stress, be nice to your opponent, don't be a complete dick. And it just makes me wonder if, we've all had those instances where you want to play a casual game and buddy shows up with a complete power army and he just gets, knocked out of the game by turn 2, and it's just like, that was dumb. Maybe that's what Games Workshop is really pushing here, right? Where you have an amicable agreement with your opponent. Like if he sets down a ridiculous amount of models, you just don't kind of play with that guy. And out of mutual respect, you don't go overboard. That might be where GW is kind of going. It's just so difficult. I mean, even with all the rules and the game released today, we just don't know what's going to happen a month from now. In the meantime, try to experiment and play test with the rules. And I'd like to encourage all players to share their games and look especially for elements of the game that are competitive and new tactics and new ways of playing that the traditional players just might not have experience in. That's it for now, folks. Thank you for the ad hoc nature of the video if you watched through it, and appreciate your views. Thanks, folks.